The call button in room 314 was ringing, but there was no one in that room, no one alive anyway. I've been a nurse for 12 years, and I thought I'd seen everything the night shift could throw at me. But what happened that October night at Riverside Long-Term Care Facility still makes my hands shake when I think about it. The call button that wouldn't stop ringing, the footsteps in an empty hallway, and the figure I saw standing in the darkness. It changed everything I believed about what happens after we die. This story was originally shared on Reddit, and now I'm telling it in full detail for the first time. Every word is true, though sometimes I wish it wasn't. I started working at Riverside in 2019, taking the night shift because the pay was better and I needed the extra money for my daughter's college fund. The facility was old, built in the 1960s, with long corridors that seemed to stretch forever when you walked them alone at 3 a.m. Most nights were quiet, checking on residents, administering medications, doing paperwork while the world slept around me. The night it happened started like any other. I clocked in at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, October 15th. The day nurse, Sarah, looked exhausted as she handed over her notes. "Mr. Henderson in 314 passed this afternoon," she said quietly. "Family already came for his things, but housekeeping won't clean the room until morning." I nodded, making a note on my clipboard. Mr. Henderson had been with us for 3 years, a sweet man who always asked about my daughter. It was sad, but death was part of working in long-term care. You learn to compartmentalize, to keep moving forward. The first few hours passed normally. I did my rounds at midnight, checking on each resident, making sure everyone was comfortable. Mrs. Chun in 302 needed her pain medication. Mr. Rodriguez in 308 was having trouble sleeping, so I sat with him for a few minutes, talking about his grandson's baseball game until his eyes grew heavy. It was around 2:30 a.m. when things started to feel different. I was at the nurse's station, updating charts on the computer, when I heard it, a soft ding from down the hall. The sound was familiar, one I heard dozens of times each shift. A call button. I looked at the display panel on the wall. Room 314 was lit up in red. My stomach tightened. That was Mr. Henderson's room. The empty room. Sometimes call buttons malfunction, especially in an older building like ours. I grabbed my flashlight. Half the hallway lights were on timers to save money, and headed down the corridor. My soft-soled shoes barely made a sound on the worn linoleum floor. The hallway felt longer than usual. The air was thick, heavy, like right before a thunderstorm. I could hear my own breathing, quick and shallow. Why was I nervous? It was just a mechanical glitch. I reached room 314 and pushed open the door. The room was dark, lit only by the pale moonlight filtering through the blinds. The bed was stripped down to the plastic mattress. The chair where Mr. Henderson used to sit and read his mystery novels was pushed against the wall. Everything was still silent. Then the call button dinged again. The sound came from the device mounted on the wall next to the bed. The red light was flashing insistently. I walked over and examined it closely with my flashlight. The wire that should have connected it to the wall was hanging loose, unplugged. I picked up the disconnected end, confused. How could it be ringing if it wasn't even connected? I pressed the reset button, and the dinging stopped. The sudden silence felt oppressive. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe there was a short circuit somewhere, some crossed wires in the wall. That's when I heard breathing behind me. Not my breathing, someone else's. Slow, raspy, like someone struggling to fill their lungs. The same sound Mr. Henderson made in his final days when the pneumonia took hold. I spun around. The room was empty. The breathing stopped. My hands were trembling as I backed toward the door. Every instinct told me to get out of that room. As I reached for the door handle, the call button started dinging again. Ding, ding, ding. Urgent, insistent, desperate. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran down that hallway like something was chasing me. I nearly collided with Marcus, the nursing aide who worked nights with me. "Whoa, what's wrong?" he asked, steadying me. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to catch my breath. The call button in 314. It keeps going off, but it's not plugged in. Marcus frowned. 314? That's empty. Mr. Henderson. "I know," I interrupted. "Come with me. Please." We walked back together. Having Marcus beside me made me feel braver, more rational. We were medical professionals. There had to be a logical explanation. The door to 314 was closed. I knew I'd left it open when I ran out. Marcus reached for the handle, but I grabbed his arm. "Wait. Listen." We stood in the dim hallway, straining to hear. At first, nothing. Then faintly we heard it. Ding, ding, ding. The call button still going. Marcus pushed open the door and flipped on the overhead lights. The harsh fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, revealing the empty room. The call button was silent now, the red light dark. Must be an electrical problem, Marcus said, but his voice was uncertain. He walked over to inspect the device. Yeah, look, it's completely disconnected. No way it could be. The lights went out. Not just in the room. The entire hallway plunged into darkness. Emergency lighting should have kicked in immediately, but it didn't. We were in complete blackness. I fumbled for my flashlight, my fingers clumsy with fear. The beam cut through the darkness, creating dancing shadows on the walls. Marcus had his phone light on, sweeping it around the room. Power must have tripped, he said. Let's go check the breaker. As we turned to leave, my flashlight beam caught something in the corner of the room. A figure standing perfectly still. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like a hospital gown. I gasped and swung the light back. Nothing there. Just the empty corner. Did you see that? I whispered. See what? Marcus was already at the door. I didn't answer. Maybe it was my imagination, shadows playing tricks. We hurried back to the nurse's station. The lights there were working fine, casting their normal sterile glow. The computer screens hummed quietly. That's weird, Marcus said. Power's fine here. I checked the electrical panel display on the wall. All circuits showed normal. According to this, there was no power outage anywhere in the building. We grabbed a work order tablet to report the issue when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The motion sensor log for the third floor showed activity. Lots of activity. According to the timestamps, someone had been walking up and down the hallway for the past hour. Room to room, a continuous path of movement. But Marcus and I were the only staff on the floor. All the residents were accounted for in their beds. This has to be malfunctioning too, Marcus said, but he didn't sound convinced. I pulled up the security camera feed on the computer. The night vision cameras showed the third floor hallway clearly. Empty. But as I scrolled back through the recorded footage, I saw it. A figure walking slowly down the hall, stopping at each door, then moving on. The timestamp was from 20 minutes ago. The figure stopped at room 314 and went inside. It never came out. Marcus and I looked at each other. Without speaking, we both knew we had to go back. We couldn't leave without checking on our residents, making sure everyone was safe. This time, we brought more flashlights and the emergency medical kit. The hallway lights were working again, humming with their familiar electrical buzz. Room 314's door was open, exactly as we'd left it. The room was empty. The call button hung silent on the wall. We did a complete check of every room on the floor. All residents were safe, sleeping peacefully. Mrs. Chun snored softly in 302. Mr. Rodriguez had finally found rest in 308. Everything was normal. But when we returned to the nurse's station, there was a note on the desk that hadn't been there before, written in shaky handwriting on a piece of paper from the notepad we kept by the phone. Thank you for coming. The handwriting looked familiar. I'd seen it dozens of times on request forms and menu selections. It was Mr. Henderson's. Marcus picked up the note with trembling fingers. This isn't possible. I took the paper from him and walked to the filing cabinet where we kept resident records. I pulled out Mr. Henderson's file and compared the handwriting. It was identical. The way he crossed his T's with a little flourish, the distinctive loop in his Y's. Maybe someone's playing a prank, Marcus suggested weakly. But we both knew that wasn't true. The security footage showed no one entering the nurse's station. The motion sensors had recorded movement with no visible source. The call button had rung without power. The rest of the shift passed in tense silence. We stayed together, neither of us willing to do rounds alone. Every small sound made us jump. Every shadow seemed to move in the corner of our eyes. At 6 a.m., I went to room 314 one last time before the day shift arrived. I needed to see it in the morning light, to convince myself it was just an ordinary empty room. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the walls a soft orange. The room looked peaceful, almost welcoming. As I stood in the doorway, I remembered Mr. Henderson's last coherent words to me, a week before he passed. "I'm not afraid," he had said, holding my hand with surprising strength. "But I worry about being forgotten, about no one knowing I was gone." I thought about all the residents who had passed through these rooms over the years. How many of them left without anyone to remember them properly? How many departures went unnoticed except for a note in a file? The call button remained silent, the red light dark. But I walked over to it anyway. I placed my hand on it gently, the way I would touch a patient's hand to offer comfort. "We knew," I said softly to the empty room. "We knew you were gone, Mr. Henderson. And we remember." A warm breeze touched my face, which was impossible. The windows were sealed, the air conditioning off. But I felt it clearly, like a gentle exhale of relief. When housekeeping came to clean the room that morning, they found something odd. Under the chair, pushed back against the wall, was Mr. Henderson's favorite book, an Agatha Christie mystery he'd been reading the week before he died. His bookmark was still in place, marking the last chapter he'd never gotten to finish. His family swore they had packed all his belongings. They had a detailed inventory list, and the book wasn't on it. Security footage showed no one entering the room between the time the family left and when housekeeping arrived. I kept the book. I know I probably shouldn't have, but it felt wrong to throw it away. I finished reading it for him. The butler did it, in case you were wondering. After that night, room 314 stayed quiet for about a month. Then in November, a new resident moved in, Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher with mild dementia. She loved the room immediately, said it felt welcoming and warm. One evening, she called me over during my rounds. "Dear," she said, "the nice man who visits me in the evening asked me to thank you." "What man?" I asked, checking her visitor log. No one had signed in. "The tall gentleman with the kind eyes. He sits in that chair and reads to me sometimes when I can't sleep. He has such a soothing voice." My skin prickled. "What has he read?" "Mystery novels," she said with a smile. "He particularly likes Agatha Christie." I never told Mrs. Patterson about Mr. Henderson. But sometimes, late at night, when I passed room 314, I could swear I heard the soft rustle of turning pages. The call button never rang again, not in that desperate, insistent way. But occasionally it would give a single, gentle ding. Not a call for help, but more like a greeting. I continued working at Riverside for 2 more years. During that time, I experienced other things I couldn't explain. Shadows in empty rooms. Voices in vacant hallways. The feeling of being watched when I was alone. But nothing ever felt threatening. If anything, it felt like the building itself was alive with the memories of everyone who had lived and died within its walls. I learned to make peace with it. Death, I realized, isn't always an ending. Sometimes it's just a transition, a shifting from one state of being to another. The boundaries we think are solid, between life and death, between here and gone, maybe they're more fluid than we believe. Other nurses started sharing their own experiences with me. The day shift supervisor admitted she'd heard piano music from the empty recreation room, playing the exact songs that Mrs. Franklin used to perform before her stroke. The weekend nurse mentioned seeing a cat in the hallway, even though no pets were allowed, until she learned about Whiskers, a therapy cat who had lived in the facility 20 years ago. We never reported these things officially. What would we say? That Riverside Long-Term Care Facility was haunted? That our deceased residents sometimes stuck around? It would have sounded insane. But we knew. Those of us who worked there, especially the night shift, we knew the truth. The facility's official records show that room 314 has had an unusually high rate of patient satisfaction since that October night. Residents who stay there report feeling peaceful, comforted, never alone. Several have mentioned the friendly man who checks on them at night, though no male staff members work that particular wing during the graveyard shift. I left Riverside in 2021 to take a position at a newer hospital closer to home. My daughter was starting high school, and I wanted to work day shifts to spend more time with her. On my last night, I made one final round, saying goodbye to the residents and the rooms that had become so familiar. When I reached room 314, Mrs. Patterson had been moved to a different facility closer to her family, and the room was empty again. I stood in the doorway, flashlight in hand, even though the lights were working fine. "I'm leaving," I said to the empty room. "But I wanted to say thank you for reminding me that caring for someone doesn't end when they do. That connection, compassion, maybe those things are stronger than death." The call button dinged once. A soft, gentle sound. A farewell. I still think about that night often. When people ask me if I believe in ghosts, I don't know how to answer. What I experienced doesn't fit neatly into the categories of real or imaginary. It exists in that liminal space between what we know and what we feel, between science and faith.